So I haven't done that second island yet, but I thought this was pretty cool. Some of the neighbors have chipped in and started doing some work. So you can see this island on the left here. This one's the one that still needs to be done. This is the one that I did on the right. But old mulch, old mulch. Look at all that new mulch. I don't think they were able to finish because of how hot it was. But that's pretty neat. About 2 weeks, and we're finally back at the front of the island. Got all our tools. Bow rake for spreading mulch and pulling up the old mulch. Round point shovel for piercing the redefined bed. Square point shovel for moving material, spreading mulch, scooping up all the old stuff, and then trimming out the inside of the shrub, and then for weeds. See, I got all this stuff here. So if you're doing a job like this, one of the things you have to just figure out is how long you think trimming all this stuff would take. And at least, in my opinion, if you can do volunteer projects like this, it's good because you can get an idea how long something takes you without the pressure of it being a real job. So you'll be able to say, well, I started at this time and I ended at this time. So now I know in the future this type of work takes, you know, this many hours. And for the most part, that's how I did, you know, landscape type work. So you look at something and guess how long it takes, and then, you know, add in some kind of buffer, 20 or 30%, depending on how much you think might go wrong. And then, you know, multiply that by whatever you want to get per hour. And that's pretty much how you do it. And if you are bidding this, there's going to be things that affect how fast you can do it. So you've got, you know, the weather. Is it really hot? Really hot, you're not going to be able to go as fast, so it's going to take a while. Bugs, right now I've got gnats flying all around my head, so it's making me go slower because I'm swatting at them. Debris is another one. What are you going to do with the debris? Can you dump it on site, or do you have to throw it in the back of a trailer and, you know, drive 20 minutes to get rid of it? You've got to factor in a price for that. So, for instance, where I live, dumps don't cost anything, but you still have to spend the time of loading it and making it fit in whatever containers you've got. And so there's a cost associated with that, so you've got to factor in how long and how much am I going to spend on debris removal, and that's going to go into how long it takes to complete the entire project. If there's any type of weeding, you got to figure out what kind of weeds are they. So if you look down here, you see a lot of grass, right? And at least down here in the south with our centipede and St. Augustine, they like to run. This is another thing. Is the plant that you're digging around, going to have an established root system? If so, when you're removing mulch, you're going to run into all kind of stuff like that. See, roots. So you're going to have to deal with roots. That's going to make your job harder, especially when you're tearing everything up. This is great for getting old stuff up and breaking it loose. But again, you see it catching on all these roots. So if you're mulching a bed that's got something that's sending out pretty big roots, then you're going to be dealing with those too. You're left with all this grass that you're going to have to go back behind, and you could cover it, but you know, it just depends on what the customer wants. If you tell them it'll be cheaper to just cover it than rip it all out, and they're fine with that, then yeah, that's fine too. Oh, well, we talked about insects. Here's another thing. So look at what you can see them running around. Those are fire ants, probably about as long as my pinky nail. And those aren't going to be any good to try and work around. You see, that's not something you would have known about unless you had dealt with them in the past. So these are all some things you've got to think about when you're pricing jobs. And that's another reason you've got that 20 or 30% buffer. That's another reason you've got that 20 or 30% buffer, because there's stuff that's going to happen that you just can't foresee. You know, I've dealt with wasps in bushes before, but I didn't think there was going to be any here, so I wouldn't have thought of that. But there's ants. If you've ever got a job where you're taking something up or cutting something, and you've got old mulch or clippings that you've got to load up, that's a spot where you've really got to be careful and not overestimate your ability. Because I've had some times where loading the stuff took as much time as cutting it or getting it up, so you just want to make sure that you account for that. When you're redefining your bed, how far out are you going to go? If you're coming and extending it, you're going to have to be cutting through grass, which is really tough work. this is another reason to build some kind of buffer in, because all this stuff over here is nothing but roots, and I can't get that grass up. So if this were a job where I had to get the grass up, especially since that grass came up so easily, if I would have said, oh yeah, that grass came up so easy, this one is too, I would have been in big trouble, because the roots of this tree are all interwoven with the roots of those runners, and you can't pull up the whole thing. You can just pull up a little sprig at a time. So with that being said, I can't get any more of that grass done, so we're just going to cover it with mulch, and it'll have to be good enough. And if your trailer's small enough that you can put a tarp in, it's going to make your life a lot easier too. Well, maybe it makes your life easier. That was actually pretty difficult. Okay, now you gotta spread it out. We're running against the clock because I'm about to have a massive coronary. Well, no, because we're about to run out of daylight. So then too, whatever time you spend dumping, you got to rake out, so you got to count for that too. I don't know if you heard that, but my mulch job was so good, made that guy scream. Well, so that was nice. I couldn't talk as much towards the end there because I had some folks pull up and help out with the other. There's another center island where all that new mulch was, and they started helping and talking, so I wasn't able to film as much. But most of the mulch work, you know, skipped over because there's a second video you can watch that shows all the mulch stuff, and it just would have been repetitive. But there's not too much more I can think of. It's just, you know, if you're first starting out, there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to pricing, and you know, you shouldn't feel bad if you mess up bids on a couple of your first ones, because you don't know these things until you go through them, right? So there's not really any shame in it. It's just it's going to sting a little bit because you're going to be working for peanuts, as Keith likes to say, Keith Kalfas. I don't know why I said Keith like I know him. I don't know him. Yeah, me and Keith, we talk all the time, and I commented once and he gave it a thumbs up and he favorited it, so we're basically best friends. But anyways, hopefully this video helped a little bit and gives you some things to think about. Sometimes you might feel guilty charging what you feel that you need to charge, but you really shouldn't. And if before you go to a job, you think about all these different things, then when you sit there and say, well, you know, this job is $200 or $500 or it's $1,000 job or $2,500 because of all these reasons, that will reaffirm your confidence, and then that'll make it an easier sell because you'll have those reasons fresh in your mind. Why, if somebody says, well, you know, can you tell me what goes into that price? And you say, well, you know, the biggest part of it's labor, but there's a lot of other stuff that I noticed. You know, there's a few wasp nests over there, and more often than not, there's, you know, some ant mounds we've got to deal with too. You know, however much detail you go into is completely up to you. And, you know, I don't know anything about the psychology of what you should or shouldn't tell a customer. I usually just do honesty's the best policy, which with sales, that may not be that may not be what Sandler training tells you to do. But anyways, that was a ramble. Hope this video helped.